Alkaff Gardens was really the brainchild of Syed Sheikh Abdul Rahman Alkaff, and he was such a lover of old Japan that he actually commissioned a Japanese landscape architect to help him build this very garden on land that the family owned. There were also artificially created hills, and one of them was actually reminiscent of Mount Fuji.
Hi, my name is Shabir and this is the Library Report, a series where we talk to interesting people, explore exciting spaces and unearth compelling stories. I'm here at the Singapore Alcove in the newly reopened Central Public Library, where you can find an ongoing exhibition about our well-loved leisure spaces. Singapore is known for its urban jungle, but we're also equally fond of greenery, from parks and nature reserves to public gardens. Turns out this fascination goes way back. In this episode, I'll be journeying back in time to uncover a Japanese-style garden that was once a popular leisure destination in Singapore. How did it come to be, and where is it today? Do stay tuned to the end of this episode for a chance to win something special. Hi Andrea, thank you so much for joining us today. Very excited to explore the history of Alkaff Gardens, but before that, could you tell us more about the work you do at the National Library?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a librarian in the Singapore and Southeast Asia Collections Department in the National Library, my primary role involves providing reference services, building the photographs collection, and also developing content for research projects. So I contributed research to the Lepak Landscapes exhibition here at the Central Public Library where we are today. Our rich Singapore stories are brought to life through 4 unique leisure spaces in Singapore, namely Somewhere in Time, Happy Heartlands, Retail Therapy, and Fun in the Sun.
And I suppose Fun in the Sun refers to the outdoors, right? And that's where your research on Alkaff Gardens comes in?
Yeah, so through this content zone, we showcase Singapore's relationship with the outdoors, how these spaces act as communal bonding spaces, and also how they have evolved over the years. So Singapore is widely known as the Garden City or City in the Garden, and green spaces are a very big part of our society. From the Botanic Gardens to Gardens by the Bay, we've had a very long-lasting relationship with gardens. And one of the things that we showcase under Fun in the Sun is this very enduring relationship and how it began earlier than we think it did. And one of the spaces I focused on was the Alkaff Gardens, its history and unique role as a leisure space in the lives of Singaporeans at the time.
The Alkaff Mansion is familiar to many, but the Alkaff Gardens is a bit of a mystery. So could you tell us more about, how it came about and its beginnings?
Sure. The Alkaff name is one that is quite familiar. So Alkaff Gardens was actually founded by the same prominent Arab family who built the Alkaff Mansion. In the 1850s, the Alkaff family first came to Singapore, and they established a pretty lucrative trade in sugar, coffee, and spice. Later, they became very successful in the property and real estate business. And Alkaff Gardens was built alongside Bidadari Cemetery, and there was actually a road leading up towards it from Upper Serangoon Road. And the original gardens and original lake was where Cedar Girls Secondary School and Senate Estate are today.
The site has undergone major changes. Could you take us back and tell us what Alkaff Gardens was like?
Yeah, I can actually show you as well. So Alkaff Gardens was really the brainchild of Syed Sheikh Abdul Rahman Alkaff, and he was such a lover of old Japan that he actually commissioned a Japanese landscape architect to help him build this very garden on land that the family owned. So at the center of the garden was the main attraction, which was the lake. And the lake was a man-made lake, but beyond that, there were also things like a zigzag bridge, a tea house on the banks of the lake, an arched wooden bridge, as well as a stone lantern feature. And besides all this, there were also artificially created hills, and one of them was actually reminiscent of Mount Fuji. So what was so special about this garden was that it was very much a pleasure garden in the sense that it really reflected the owner's love for a Japanese landscape and a Japanese style, which was very different at that time because a lot of gardens in Singapore were actually in more of a Western style.
A garden in Singapore with a touch of old Japan. That's really interesting. What made Alkaff Gardens such an important leisure space for Singaporeans?
Well, as we have seen, Alkaff Gardens really reflected its owner's personal taste and love for Japanese gardenscapes. and it is what researcher Raffaella Cini would call a private pleasure garden. But Alkaff Gardens kind of defied definition in some way because it was very much a public private pleasure garden. Through oral history interviews shared by descendant L.B. Alkaff, we actually learned that Alkaff Gardens was originally planned as a weekend retreat just for the family.
Originally, it was a small one for the family to go weekend. It was small just for the family. And I think the idea got to them that why keep it to the family, well, let's open it and expand it from them. And then it's open to public.
And it was then opened to the public in 1929 as an act of generosity because the practice of affluent families occasionally opening their homes and lavish gardens to the masses was quite customary in the 19th and early 20th centuries. For instance, Whampoa Gardens, which was owned by Whampoa or Hua Kay, he opened the gardens during festive seasons like Chinese New Year. But Alkaff Gardens was slightly different because it was opened every single day of the year and anyone could just stroll in.
Green spaces are a big draw for nature lovers and lovers alike. Was it similar for Alkaff Gardens as well? Like, what did Singaporeans back then use the space for?
Alkaff Gardens was open to the public free of charge, and this allowed the non-European population to enjoy the gardens and the lake as well. According to our research, the site was known as, and I quote, the real Singapore as 9/10 of the population knew it. So yes, Alkaff Gardens would have been bustling with visitors, from courting couples to outdoor enthusiasts. Visitors went on picnics, a pastime that is still popular today, and people would be taking photographs amidst the scenic views. For a small fee, they could also go boating on the lake, as well as water cycling, and also enjoy some refreshments. And I believe that the way we enjoy green spaces has taken on a modern twist, but its fundamental purpose is still the same, which is to bring people together, to share and to appreciate the space.
Alkaff Gardens held such prominence in our collective consciousness. Can we assume that it made its way into our films and literature?
Sure. Alkaff Gardens was a romantic rendezvous spot for lovers, and this lived experience was actually depicted in cinematic and literary works as well. So for instance, in the love story Rayuan Sukma or Call of the Soul, which was filmed on site at the gardens. So the gardens played a pretty big role in other films by Shaw Brothers Malay Film Productions as well, and even featured renowned actors like P. Ramlee. It was also featured in books set in Singapore like Lions and Tigers, where author Ralph Modder talked about how his characters went on dates in Alkaff Gardens. So through these representations in literature and film, we actually see how Alkaff Gardens was a pretty big part of Singapore's social community at the time.
Seeing Alkaff Gardens live on in our movies and literature is truly special, but what happened to it?
Unfortunately, Alkaff Gardens suffered bombing by the Japanese during the war and eventually fell into disrepair. It remained closed to the public during the Japanese occupation itself. And after the war, the Alkaffs decided to return to their core business of trading, and the land where Alkaff Gardens once stood was sold to Senate Realty Company. Senate Estate was then built on that site, which meant the end of Alkaff Gardens. And many were quite disappointed by the announcement of the loss of this garden because it was really quite loved by the public. And even back then, our community really appreciated green spaces, both the privately owned ones and the public ones. Today, Singapore has a variety of green spaces for leisure like the Singapore Botanic Gardens and the Jurong Lake Gardens, which houses the Chinese gardens and the Japanese gardens, which were first established in the 1970s. So from then till now, we've actually had a really lasting appreciation and fondness for nature as a place to unwind and a place to enjoy.
The way we interact with and within nature has evolved with the times, but one thing remains constant: our love for green spaces and gardenscapes. You can learn more about these and other leisure spaces in Singapore at the Singapore Alcove in Central Public Library. Before you go, tell us what you love about Singapore's green leisure spaces and gardenscapes. Comment below for a chance to win $30 in gift vouchers. Thanks for watching this episode of the Library Report. If you enjoyed what you saw, give us a like and make sure to subscribe, plus hit that notification bell for updates. Until our next report, see you soon.